Good morning. It's Eddie G's Music World for another edition. Uh, we are at the 24th of October, 2018. We're going to have a couple of different things we're doing. We're going to do a Def Leppard retrospect and continue our top 100 guitarist countdown. The reason I'm doing a Def Leppard retrospect is because they were just nominated. They're in a group of about 15 people. So they're nominated to be inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It it has not been announced which of the 15 or so acts will be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but I'm going to guess that they will end up in there this year because of the fact that every year there's one major success band that gets in. Like in the past, there's been Kiss, Bon Jovi before last year. There's always one big act, and then there's a few medium-sized acts lower down that get in. And Leppard's been around for many years, so they're not going to get in. They're not going to be like Judas Priest, where their name gets thrown in the nomination list and then they fall off the next year, or they don't get in and they wait for years. Because Def Leppard sold so many records that pretty much have to throw them into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and that's what they'll do. You'll find out in, I guess, in the next month or two, and then in April, I'm sure the band will be wherever the ceremony is, and they'll be happy to be inducted. So the thing with this band is they're kind of like a typical working class England, from Sheffield, England. They kind of were all doing like odd jobs, factory work. Like most of these bands, you go to look through all these bands when they were young. Most of them did lousy jobs, barely making ends meet. So they worked in Sheffield, was a steel town, and these factory jobs, it kind of started early on with Joe Elliott and Rick Allen. He was an original. I think Steve Clark was, and there might have been one other guy that was at the very beginning. And from then, they did a lot of clubs, cover versions, and struggled. It's a typical story that you hear. And they gelled together, worked hard, started to become a little more focused after 2 through 4 years of clubbing around. And that's when they started to become famous for it. I mean, if you look back on their career, you see that Pyromania sold worldwide 10 million, Hysteria 15 million, and they graduated into the big leagues with that. There was a time, of course, there's been many tragedies. This is a soap opera type of band. Like, I think every band is like, has people die and has people get kicked out, leave. So Def Leppard was typical of that. And like, for example, the most famous issues was, of course, the one where Rick Allen had the big car crash, driving too fast. I think it was a Ferrari, something along those lines. And he, of course, was discovered in a field by 2 people that had medical background, and they helped him out, got him into hospital. And the thing with him is he had to relearn all his drum parts because his right arm was severed. They did try to sew it back. They sewed it back, but it got infected and it did not work properly. So he had to take one of his feet and turn it into a hand as far as the drum movements go. I first saw Def Leppard in 1987, I'm going to say. This is 2 or 3 years after the accident, so he had his drum kit all altered so it could be used. His foot was taking over from the arm that he lost, and he was quite good. But I know at the beginning there was some talk that maybe he was worried that they would replace him, because he didn't have one of his arms, but he spent months working on adapting to the situation that he was in, which was the fact that he did not have one of his arms to do the typical style of drumming. But he managed to do so, and they never did hire anyone else. I mean, maybe there was somebody else temporarily thrown in. I think that's the case. They had a guy in like for a few shows that was like backing him up in case he screwed up or he couldn't handle it. But that guy lasted a few shows, not that much. I don't remember his name. And he was he left because he wasn't needed. If Rick Allen could handle it, then there's no need for a guy to take over and fill in for him when he can't handle it, because he looked like he was doing okay with that. Of course, another major catastrophe was Steve Clark, I think an original guitarist, had a major issue with alcohol and drugs, and was on and off wagons, and major problems with addiction. And then he did pass away. I can't remember. Was it 89? Sounds like about 91. That's what I remember. 1991. And then I think it was, trying to think, he was only 31 years old. And if I remember correctly, Phil Collin replaced him. But these are things that, there's a lot of change around in that band. And I don't write things as a Wikipedia page or look into things as a Wikipedia page. I'm basically just going over the major exciting things about a group or an act that I feel is important enough to mention. And if I skip some guy that left and then came back, it's not really a major problem. I just tell you as much as I can remember. And from there, hopefully that you guys get some entertainment out of my discussions of this type of stuff. So, okay. I know that a third situation, which was also a bit of a problem, Phil Collin, not Phil Collins, but Phil Collin, who was a part of the band. He was also a guitarist, I believe, or a bass player, I'm not sure. His wife almost died a few months ago in childbirth, so that's the third major catastrophe to hit this band. They've had a lot of ups and downs, and that one was rough too. That was like the summer. She was pregnant, giving birth, and then something happened to her, but she lived, and the baby lived too. So luckily that was averted. And let me see if I can think of anything. I know that there was a time in between Pyromania and Hysteria where there was a lot of touring debt amassed, meaning, a lot of times the record company backs you up and they put up the money, but if your albums don't sell as well, they start charging you back for all the fees of running around. And there was some touring debt that they accumulated. So the band was kind of struggling financially at that time. And then Hysteria came out and sold 15 million. And then, of course, things settled down for the band when you realize that they came out of the situation with that success. That was an amazing turnaround for the band. I remember hearing that constantly on the radio, FM, and a little AM too, when Hysteria was really big. A band like Def Leppard, they kind of were on a tightrope between metal and a little bit of pop. They weren't like Metallica hard heavy metal. They were lighter than that, but they were a little harder than Bon Jovi. So they were kind of drifting between the two extremes, heavy metal and metal pop type of thing. There was a time when, let's say, the band had been touring quite a bit and they were kind of burnt out. I mean, the road was very, they're making money, whatever, getting exposure, selling records, but it drains your personal life. And they had girls. There was a story that they had the guitarists and bass players had a little trapdoor on the live shows, and they would kind of go underneath, and there'd be women and drugs and booze waiting for them for their little break while the singer and the drummer were continuing. So they had their little groupie break that they would be a part of, and enjoy that situation that they had, because that was in the days of excess of Def Leppard, when they weren't health conscious. They were just enjoying the women, the drugs, the alcohol, etc. Progressing along the path of Def Leppard's popularity, they came around to the album Adrenalize, which was like Let's Get Rocked, I think was on there. So this is like 1991. It seemed like they were still kind of not falling yet. They weren't out of the loop of popularity at that point. They were still. Remember when they came out with that? I didn't know if that would really be a huge album, but it's still. I don't know what the stats are for the sales are, but they really, really continue to keep their popularity going. So by the 91, they were still a big band. You start to get to the late 90s, mid 90s. They had a few kind of, I would say, less metal songs. They were pretty good. I heard them, but the grunge scene was kind of like costing them some fans and costing them some record sales. So it's Def Leppard they weren't out, but they were like kind of in a bit of a transitional stage. There was Mutt Lange produced I don't know how many of their CDs, a lot, 2 or 3 of them, I think, and he was obviously a big influence on their sound too. By 1999, they had an album, Euphoria, and that also kind of didn't show much of a turnaround yet. I mean, they had a song called Promises, which was a bit of a song that was popular. There have been guys like Pete Willis, who was the bass player. There was Rick Savage, a bass player. These guys have come back forth. They've been in the band, and like I don't remember the order they came and went. They did Live Aid, which helped their career a lot in the 80s, so that kept them going and kept them popularity. So I'm kind of backing up a little bit because I was talking about the late 90s, but then I look back on some memory of that situation where they did Live Aid, which helped them quite a bit, keep them in the public eye a lot. Trying to think if there's any major other stories I can tell you about Def Leppard. They toured with Alice Cooper in the 70s. I know that. Sammy Hagar. High and Dry was also like a bit of a lull for them. That was one of the I think 3rd or 4th albums. But overall, I mean, you can't deny they've had a great resurgence lately. There was also another illness that Vivian Campbell, who I think he's still in the band, a guitarist, had Hodgkin's lymphoma. So more issues that they had to deal with throughout all of their years of recording and touring. There was an American that replaced Steve Clark that died. He was an American, Vivian Campbell. I've heard him talk, so you can tell the difference, obviously. And he's still there. They have a spot in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. They still do a lot of touring. They did a double bill with Journey lately. But I have seen, the last time I saw that it was Def Leppard live was 2012. They did a triple bill with Poison, and I'm going to say Lita Ford, and definitely Joe Elliott, the lead singer. He had some vocal issues. You could see he was like couldn't hit some notes, or he was having a rough time. That was 2012, and I've heard on this tour, 2018 or 17, 2018 with Journey, there's also been a few sharp nights where he could not sing all the notes as he normally does. So, there's issues with a lot of singers. They just get to a point in their career where the notes they could hit are harder to hit. But they're still out there. They're still tour. They had a CD of remakes also. Yeah. The CD was like songs that influenced them. Like I think it was it Joe Walsh was one, and some other heavy rock stuff that they did. But, the band has sold, they also did songs by David Bowie, Badfinger on this Yeah CD. These are acts that influenced them quite a bit. So overall, when you think of the band having sold 65 million albums worldwide, album CDs, legal downloads are all included in that, you'd have to say that Def Leppard has had an amazing career. And like a lot of people, they are most likely to become, an oldies type of band. It's just the reality of it. They cannot continue to have hit records. It's just the way it works. You don't expect to be able to pull off that kind of popularity over the years that Def Leppard has been around, like 40 years or so. But I don't expect to see them again, just because after 2 times seeing Def Leppard, you would think that I've seen them enough, and that's most likely the case. These bands keep touring, and it gets to be expensive, and you have to start reducing the shows. I want to make one comment about a story in the news before I get to return to my top 100 guitarists, which I'm going to do next. Also, hi to Creeper Freak, who listens to me. He's one of the few. Grigster, if you listen anymore, I'm thrilled to have you listen, and anyone else. You're listening to Eddie G's Music World. So thanks for tuning in. One of your great comic, Creepo Freak on YouTube. For sure, he's got a very interesting twist on life. I'm kind of a mix of Ted Bundy and Al Bundy, if you ask me. The music store I wanted to talk about was the fact that there's an Nespresso coffee commercial where Peter Gabriel's song Salisbury Hill is used, and he has a nephew that has autism, and he's donating his money because he wrote the song and it's his song. He's donating his money to that it earns to the to help people with autism, kids with autism mostly. So that's for sure quite a good gesture of his. So I'm going to say thanks and acknowledge that Peter Gabriel did a very kind thing to help out those kids. And okay, so we're going to get back into the top 100 guitarists of all time according to Rolling Stone. And from my recollection, I did Brian May last time. So we're at Tony Iommi at number 25. Obviously, the guitarist from Black Sabbath. And his situation was that he had lost a couple of fingers. Maybe I did do him already. I wish I kept my better notes. But I'll do it again. It doesn't hurt. He was one of the pioneers of heavy metal, being in Black Sabbath all those years. Had been in Jethro Tull briefly before Black Sabbath. Either quit or got fired from them. And amazingly, with 2 fingers that were chopped partially in a metalworking accident, he still persevered and had a brilliant career as a guitarist. I have a feeling I did do him last week. But anyway, we'll move on to the next one in case I did. Angus Young, and no shock that he would be in here. Original guitarist with AC/DC. Had this schoolboy, at first gimmick, you'd call it, because he dressed up like a schoolboy. And that was, they were an unknown band that went from Scotland to Australia and then England. And I've seen AC/DC live 3 times. And of course, this was a band that was very much needed Malcolm Young, his brother, in the band to create the sound that they did. But Angus live, of course, with all the solos and great chords that he chose for all the songs. He's amazingly not higher on this list. He's at number 24, and you can't have an AC/DC without him. He's not that old, so he's probably going to find another singer or bring Brian Johnson back and keep AC/DC going for quite a bit of time. And Buddy Guy's another one of these guys. He's number 23 on the list. He is a blues type of guy. I've been asked to go to his concerts. He's come here a few times. He's from Louisiana. But, you know, what I said to that person that asked me to go, I said, there's just too many acts coming every year for me to go run out 20 times a year to see bands. But I've heard a little bit of his music. He has the reputation of being one of these guys who got a lot of fame, but not as much as other guys like Clapton, who rose to a higher level financially than Buddy Guy did. And but look, this is a list of people who were brilliant guitarists, not necessarily top 10 acts that sold 10, 20, 30 million records, which I'm sure, without looking, I don't think Buddy Guy sold 10 or 30 million. We come to another guy on the list, famous for not being mainstream as well, Frank Zappa, number 22. And he's a guy, great guitarist. He used to come to Montreal a lot when he was alive, played the Forum. So I never did go. I always thought of him as this outside guy, and I never knew more than 2 or 3 songs. Because in order to really, really, really appreciate an act, you've got to be able to, you know, dig deep into their catalog, and I never really did. I was fed the 3-4 songs on my local radio station by him. They did the Dynamo Hum and Valley Girl and maybe 1 or 2 others over like 30 years. So I never dug deep enough to really appreciate him, to know the ins and outs. I know his son Dweezil runs around touring, doing the music of Frank Zappa. So that's become a family thing where the father passes away and the kids take over, kind of thing, financially make money off of the name. I know his wife, I think, just passed away, his widow, Frank Zappa's widow, and she once came to Montreal to sue somebody that used one of Frank's songs in a commercial. So this was like a minor league thing that, you know, maybe she got entitled to a few $100 or a few thousand, and she came all the way to Montreal to fight it in court. Montreal or Quebec, somewhere far in Quebec City or something. I don't remember where. Let's move on to number 21, see if I have another story. Chet Atkins, a major country star, number 21. Also a record executive, producer in the 60s. Kind of started the Nashville sound, country music. Known to be a great guitarist, a lot of acoustic work. Jazz, maybe a bit, classical styles. I'm trying to think what song he's best known for. I know Your Cheating Heart was one. Wake Up Little Susie. He must have played that on the. I don't know if he played that on the records for other people or he had his own versions out, or he wrote them. I don't know. But for sure, I know his name pretty well. I think he played guitar on Hank Williams' Your Cheating Heart. That's what I remember hearing. So also Heartbreak Hotel. So this guy did a bit of session work. He produced. He was an all-around major figure in the music business for sure. Next on the list, a guy who's come to Montreal many, many, many times, tours years and years and years and years. Carlos Santana. But he doesn't sing. So the singers are always rotating, guys from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. The singers are coming and going, so you're not going to get the guy that sang on the records, that's for sure. You ain't going to parade out 7 guys and have all the songs that you liked, you know, sung by all these guys. It would cost too much to bring them on tour with him. But I know one story. I know the guy from Journey, Neil Schon, was in his band and at Woodstock with him. He left Journey and, of course, went on to form Journey, and massive success for Neil Schon. And but I know one thing about Carlos Santana. He once ran into some old guy in the street that was homeless, asking for money, and then he remembered he helped the guy out for somehow. because he once did some session work way back in the 60s for Carlos Santana. And this guy, I don't remember how he helped him out. Either he gave him some money or he gave him a job of some kind. I don't remember what the details were. But one thing that Santana did, which created an album that got on my nerves, it was 1999's Supernatural. Sold so many millions of copies. It wasn't that amazing to me. It was that song by Rob Thomas, Forget About It, whatever the hell it was. They played it 9,000 times a week for like 2 years. And then the other song there, I don't know what it was. They beat the death out of this album. It was so mainstream and kind of commercial, and I never was that into it because of the fact that they played it to death. But that made Carlos Santana probably more money than all of the other albums because it sold many, many millions of copies. And Carlos Santana, not questioning his ability to play great guitar, but if you look up the songs he wrote from Santana, and he must have had like 12, 13 hits. He didn't write any of the popular songs, not one. There were all other people, and the ones that he wrote were the ones that nobody really knows. I mean, they were like just songs that not got a lot of airplay. Maybe they were great songs. I didn't go research them and start to throw their names in YouTube and try to hear what this unknown songs were like. I didn't feel it was that important. But look, say what you will about the guy. I like the version of She's Not There. The guitar work on that, the cover of the Zombie song, so there's that. And of course, he had the other good songs too. Okay, we're looking at number 19 on the Rolling Stone Top 100 Greatest Guitarists. James Burton. I'm going to have to say I don't know that guy's music too much. He wrote Susie Q for Dale Hawkins. He was in Ricky Nelson's band. So it's a guy under the radar of mainstream, but obviously a major contributor. He had a distinct finger picking and flat picking style that he used. And I know that Keith Richards has some good things to say about him over the years. He country style songs like Joni Mitchell, Graham Parsons type of thing. He played on some of those records. He covered an Elvis song. And I don't know if he's still touring. I think he might be. He's probably pretty old, obviously, at this point. But he's another guy that gets a lot of respect, but you don't think of him that much, He's not a guy off the top of your head that you really have in your mind, Let's see if there's anything else I can say about this guy. Next, we'll just move on to number 18, a guy they invented, like he had a version of the guitar. I don't know if he's the first guy to ever come up with a guitar. Les Paul, number 18, but he's credited as creating a guitar sound that all other guitarists worship. He had a How High the Moon with Les Paul and Mary Ford did that hit. But this guy had his own line of guitars. People went to buy them. He made money selling guitars, manufacturing guitars. Overdubbing was a lot of his innovation. Multi-layered studio overdubs, vari-speed tape playback. These are all studio techniques that this guy worked on and is innovative and is known for. And nobody else had done it before him. You'd have to go deep into his catalog to get really all the different things that he came up with. He died in 2009 at 94. He lived quite a while. He still did shows in his old age, kind of like Chuck Berry, worked into his 90s, and definitely a revolutionary in that world. We are at number 17. And Neil Young, I did see Neil Young once, 10 years ago, I'd say. Canadian, came into the Roger So's Nash and Young, Buffalo Springfield. Saw him live, had that distinctive guitar style that he's known for. Crazy Horse was his band. He somehow got caught up in this grunge thing because he was wearing like, I know Pearl Jam liked him. He maybe did shows with Pearl Jam. I don't know. He somehow managed to extend into that scene. But a lot of feedback related sounds coming out of his guitar that he was known for. And he had some new Pandora or something, some kind of new music downloading business that he represented. It wasn't his business completely, like he was a spokesperson for them. And still around, must be 70 years old, 72, 73. Known for songs like Down by the River, Mr. Soul, and other ones. Next on the list, on Eddie G's Music World Top 100 Great Guitarists, greatest guitarist, another guy from the Allman Brothers. There must be three guys. Either Dwayne Allman's been mentioned or he will be. Anyway, this is Derek Trucks. He was a big part of this group. Nephew of Butch Trucks, also in the band at different times. Known for his slide guitar. I was my son bought a little toy guitar for $4, and I was showing him, little tricks to make it sound a little bit interesting. And then from there, I showed him an Allman Brothers version of Blue Sky, and showed him this is how guitar really. This is how the great guitarists play. And the phone rang here, so I'm like distracted. We don't have a real studio here. This is the house, but I don't know if it's for me or not. Somebody called. We'll see. I'll find out later. It's an insight into my exciting life. Anyway, Derek Trucks, for sure. Listen to the Allman Brothers. You'll hear the greatness of this guitarist and appreciate them. I don't know if the Allman Brothers are still around touring or whatever, but for sure, Derek Trucks played with him for many years, and a lot of guitarists in that band. If you see some videos, you'll see there's like 2 or 3 guys going at the same time. Freddie King, another blues guy, number 15 on the top 100 guitarists. Another guy, he had a song called I Love the Woman, and Eric Clapton mentions that he was influenced by that guitar style. Jeff Beck mentions him, Peter Green, Mick Taylor. I always wonder, like, did a guy like this ever really make any money? Because, sure, everybody worshipped him. He was this great, brilliant guy and did all these guitar licks that everybody thought was great. But at the end of the day, when the checks started to be written, guys who influence other people may or may not have profited from that. Like, was he never had any major hits. I don't know if he wrote any big songs. Maybe guys like Clapton and all these other people worked with him and got him paid. I don't know. But I know the name Freddie King, but I don't know enough about him to give you a whole long story about it because it's bluesy stuff, and I've never really given a lot of time to it. Now, here's somebody that I knew would be on the list, and here we are at number 14 of the top 100, and I was listening to Pink Floyd the other day, and David Gilmour, of course, is at number 14, high up on the list, as everybody knows. He entered into the band Pink Floyd when Syd Barrett was kind of like having mental health issues, apparently, and he kind of was like alongside Syd Barrett for many, many years. Not many years, that's not true. Maybe a couple of years. And then at some point, Syd Barrett had to leave the band, and Gilmour stayed. So he was the mainstay of Pink Floyd for all the time. They're a dormant band. They've never said that Pink Floyd ended their band. Nobody has ever said Pink Floyd is done. But Gilmour, Mason, and owned the name Pink Floyd, and Richard Wright had passed away, the keyboardist. So when Roger Waters tours, you can't say Pink Floyd. You can't call it Pink Floyd. You have to say Roger Waters because he doesn't own the name. But I've heard of his guitar over the years, and there's a lot. I could go into details of the brilliance of this guy. And I did see him live in the Olympic Stadium in 1977. He was in the band that was Waters was still there. Wright was there, and Mason. So I saw the main band. And David Gilmour was asked about reuniting with the other. With Waters and bringing him back into the fold, and he says, "None of us need the money. We don't really like. We're not crazy, you know. We don't work well with Roger Waters, so it's not happening. It doesn't look like it ever will. But you know, you have to get on with life. They're an oldies band at this point. They haven't had a new record in like 15 or 20 years, and they're a great band. But I don't think you're going to hear a lot of new material from guys in their 70s at this point." So we'll just leave it go at that. Albert King, it's kind of a story like Freddie King. I don't know. I'm trying to remember, is there anything that stands out in my mind about the guy? Except I know that he influenced people like Freddie King did too. Pioneered electric blues. He was a left-hander who played a 1959 Gibson flying upside down with the bass string unconventionally facing the floor. He had a interesting style of doing things. He was a big guy, you know. Again, everybody named King seems to be. Eric Clapton has a big deal about them. Apparently, Strange Brew, Clapton took that type of lick and from one of Freddie King's song As the Years Go By. That was used for Layla, like one of his riffs. Hendrix was a big, called him an influence as well when he opened for him in 1967. But it's another thing. How did these guys turn out? Did I do enough research on each one individually to find out their fate over time? No, I didn't. So I don't know. I'm assuming that he's not around anymore. But maybe if you ask a guy in the rock business, like a great guitarist from the past, he'll probably tell you, yeah, he was a big influence and rave about the guy. Number 12, I do know a lot about this guy, Stevie Ray Vaughan, bluesy guy, but he had a lot of crossover mainstream success from Texas, known. You know, I remember seeing a clip that he was practicing, just warming up, and he was like doing this amazing solo that got caught on tape. And obviously, a lot of these people cite him as an influence too. B.B. King, Eric Clapton again. As soon as you get high on this list, they all seem to be talking about Eric Clapton. They either influenced Clapton or Clapton influenced them. Of course, he took that horrible flight that ended in his death in the 90s. And he's come to Montreal. He did the jazz festival, I think. I remember. And definitely a guy that, had he not passed, would still be coming out with great music today. Number 11, here's the man that John Lennon said is a better guitarist than he is, George Harrison. He did I know that for sure more of the lead work was done by George than John Lennon was mostly a rhythm guitarist. But the two of them, obviously, I mean, if John Lennon saying George Harrison was better than him, you have to take him at his word for it. So he had a great solo career as well. A lot of his songs that the Beatles did, like Something and a couple, maybe Here Comes the Sun, and probably another 10 more. They always gave him a song on each album, like the last 10 albums. So they acknowledged his ability to write songs too. He wasn't just a good singer and guitarist, writer. He was definitely occupied the third most talented spot on the Beatles. Maybe others may argue, of course. Maybe someone will say that Ringo was the third and he was the fourth, but I doubt it. He was in the Traveling Wilburys for a few years, and passed away, I'm going to say, about 10 years ago, maybe 12 or 13, and had an interesting life, to say the least. And we'll go to number 10, a guy I'm not surprised to see on this list either. Innovator, of course, Pete Townsend, the writer of most of the hits from The Who, lead guitars too, produced a lot too, put stuff together in the studio innovatively, keyboard stuff. I remember seeing how he did Teenage Breakdown, or Baba O'Reilly, I should say, and how he looped different sounds to make a certain output in the recording, like he knew how to get the most in the studio done. For sure, I did see The Who live in 1997 with John Entwistle still being alive, and Zach Starkey, Ringo's son, was a drummer, and no disappointment out of Pete Townsend. It was an amazing show. They still tour. He had a little controversy where he was looking up a few things on the internet for research, he says, and he had to sign into a kiddie porn website. We'll never know what really happened there. It doesn't matter too much. Maybe he was just looking at the wrong thing, or I don't know what happened. But, you know, he had a lot of incidents where he exploded. He had a thing where he would smash his guitar. He was known for that. And a lot of commercials. Eminence Front, for one, is used in car commercials. He's probably had 6 or 7 Who songs used on TV shows, commercials. All the CSI shows that were on, I don't know if they're still on, were using Who songs. So he made a killing licensing out Who songs like the Kinks did with some of their songs. And I know the Who said, Pete Townsend once said that he didn't see money until about 10 years after the Who started. He was constantly paying off debts that the band amassed. Like, their sales were not amazing, like in the first, from the mid-60s to the early 70s. He said he had so much touring debt, and the record companies were charging him for all these different expenses that they incurred, that he didn't start making money till maybe the mid-1970s, 76, that type of thing. You don't have to guide you into the Who. You just go in, go through your CDs. I'm sure if you do that, you'll recognize the brilliance of his guitar and his writing. And he didn't sing as much as Roger Daltrey. Daltrey was the lead singer, and I'd say he sang about 15-20% of the well-known Who songs. Duane Allman. So here we go again. The guy who made this list, I think he's got practically every guy who picked up a guitar in the Allman Brothers on it. Duane Allman was him and Greg started the band, I'm sure, in Florida, and he was in Derek and the Dominoes. You could hear him on Bell Bottom Blues and Layla, plus played guitar and did some singing too with all the Allman Brothers. Died in a motorcycle accident in I think the late 60s. And of course, you can hear him on Layla with Eric Clapton and Derek and the Dominoes. Lots of slide guitar used there, and that seems to be a signature theme of the Allman Brothers, having a lot of slide guitar. And listen to Eric Clapton and him, they worked together, got a lot of amazing music from that album. And of course, the Allman Brothers have a massive catalog with people coming in and out. They had songs like Statesboro Blues, Blue Sky, like I mentioned before, and Whipping Post, a staple on the radio. You hear quite a bit on FM rock stations. Going to the next one, not surprisingly, you see Eddie Van Halen at number 8. You kind of figured that guy was going to come up soon on the list. And, of course, he's been around for 40 years or so in the music business, and more than 40 years. A lot of dormant periods in Van Halen, where currently nobody knows what they're really up to. They're just kind of taking it easy, but he influenced a lot of people. I saw Van Halen live once, and he was doing a lot of work, of course. And there was a time, like I had heard about, he turned his back on the audience because he didn't want to see how he pulled off some of the guitar licks on some of the AC/DC songs. And I know that him and his brother Alex, they switched instruments. They were originally going to be Eddie on the drums and Alex on the guitar, but because they realized Eddie was so good at the guitar, they switched to Eddie being on the guitar, and Alex was a great drummer, so that was always a major smart move. I know Sammy Hagar has been, when he was in Van Halen for a while, he says he also played guitar, but he said, listen, there's no room for a second guitarist in Van Halen. He didn't play really much, if at all, on the records and live too. I almost saw Van Halen with Sammy Hagar, but I elected to not do it. So I don't know how that would have been done live, except from hearing it, different versions of some of their music live, but I never did see them live with Sammy Hagar, only with David Lee Roth in 2007. And well, he gets all the accolades, Eddie Van Halen, so there's not really much I can say about a guy that everybody worships. Everybody knows about him. His son is now in the band, the bass player, who replaced Michael Anthony, and I saw his son Wolfgang in 2007 live. He looked like a kid. He was only 15. He looked pretty young, and obviously married Valerie Bertinelli, and that was the son they produced, and they got divorced. I know Eddie had tongue cancer for a bit, and apparently it's no longer an issue. But like I said, Van Halen is known for their not talking a lot about their private situations that are going on in the band. Wow, we might hit number 1 since we're closing in on the end of the show. We've got 12 more minutes. Let's see with number 7. Chuck Berry, of course, I mentioned him earlier. I remember going to New York and seeing that he was appearing at some point later on, but I had to go back to where I live. I never got to see him. But he's obviously quite influential. The Beatles cite him, and all the big, like the Rolling Stones, they all say how much Chuck influenced them. Famously, the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson had to go bring a briefcase full of money to Chuck Berry because Sweet Little 16, the Chuck Berry song, sounded like Surfing USA a little too much, and I think it was Surfing USA. So Chuck basically said to him, listen, you either come give me all this money or I take you to court and you get lawyer fees. So you settle it with me with a pile of money, or you go to court with me and we'll drag it out for a while and it might cost you more. So I think the story goes that Brian Wilson just made up a bunch of, took a lot of money, threw it in a briefcase, brought it over to the guy, and settled the case pretty fast. I did see Chuck Berry like on YouTube a couple of years ago. Where he looked pretty feeble. He was kind of the end of the road as far as his ability to play live was. This was about 6 months to a year before he passed away, and I know that maybe at that point shouldn't have been doing any touring anymore, because when you're that old, you when you kind of lost your ability to play live. It's just you're going to get paid, sure, because you got a name, but maybe at some point you should hang it up. But he just never did until he passed away, and he's earned his right to be at that lofty number of number 7 on the top 100 guitars of all time on Rolling Stone. Who do we have number 6? Can I guess? Who haven't we heard from? Could it be Keith Richards? I don't know if he's that lofty according to these guys, or maybe I already said him. B.B. King, wow, no surprise. King of the blues guitars. Got a lot of notoriety over the years, and passed away. I had him on a death list a few years ago. No, I had predicted B.B. King, Chuck Berry, and Fats Domino would be dead in a few years, and well, big genius that I am. Of course, they're going to be dead. They're old. But yeah, he did pass away not that long ago. And I'm trying to remember how he got the name B.B. King. It may have been Blues Boy, I think they called him, Blues Boy. And did the jazz festival I think about 15 years ago or so. Of course, well received. Many cite him as being one of the greats, especially in the guitar world. And I know Don Felder once met him from the Eagles. He met him in a tent. He wrote in a book and got to meet his idol, and he was excited. He influenced people like Billy Gibbons. John Lee Hooker talks about him. Called a genuine soloist. So he's one of the more notorious of the blues guys. You know, Freddie King, sure, all these other Albert Kings. Maybe, you know, I'm a novice at the blues guitar world, but B.B. King is the one I've heard of the most. Doesn't mean he's better or worse than the other guys, of course. Number 5, Jeff Beck, guy you hear about a lot on all these bands, revered, worked with Rod Stewart. He was in the Yardbirds with, I think he either replaced or Jimmy replaced him. Can't remember the order of that, but always a guy that, you know, persevered with all these different bands, solo albums that got a bit of traction at some point. Never, you know, he wasn't a singer, and he didn't pop out top 40 jingle bubblegum songs, so he wasn't. If you're only into top 40 like poppy stuff, you don't know much about Jeff Beck, because he's a guy that's a great guitarist, played with great bands, but he wasn't at the forefront. Like when he's playing with In the Faces with Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart is getting all the fame because he's the lead singer, and Beck is still getting famous, but he's not the guy that you at the forefront. He's not the singer, maybe, you know, but in the music world, he's revered, worshipped more than most other ones. I wonder, where's Hendrix? Will he be number 1? Are they that predictable? So there's 4 more, I'm sure. Page, Hendrix, and if Clapton wasn't mentioned, in Clapton, and then there's one more. Who could it be? I'm trying to see if I forgot somebody. Well, let's say I probably guessed 3 out of the 4. Let's see the next one. Keith Richards. Oh, I said Keith Richards just 5 minutes ago that I thought he would be up there. So I kind of did predict the top 4 because I said that he's coming up, or he was already there. Okay, I read his book, so I know quite a bit about him. I'm not going to go over all of the little stories that he went through, but let's face it, he was an art student, and he did that, and he got a, you know, he learned, from there, I don't know, he somehow was on a train, and he bumped into Mick on that train, and who had a bunch of blues records in his hand. Keith had a bunch of blues records in his hand, and then they converged into the Rolling Stones over years of playing and building themselves up. I know that when the 2 times I saw them live, the last time I saw him, Ron Wood was the other guitarist with the Rolling Stones. He's still there, of course. And you could not tell who was playing lead, who was playing guitar. They kind of weaved in and out of each other's music. So Keith, still around, the Rolling Stones, they don't stop touring. They did like 8 shows in 1 year, and they ended up outselling all of the other bands in the world, because each show they charge $500, $600, $800 a seat, and they sell to like 70, 80,000. So because of that, they outgrossed so many bands, if not all of them, just by charging so much and doing huge, like, stadium shows. And of course, they had the similar deal as McCartney and Lennon. You know, if one wrote one part of the song or all of the song, the other one got the credit, and from there, you know, they all those great hit songs that were done, there were songs that Keith Richards did by himself, but they were credited as the Rolling Stones, like Happy. He wrote it and performed all the instruments, I think. And still, of course, it wasn't a solo record, so the Rolling Stones were credited with it. Let's see, we're going to number 3. Of course, one of the guys I predicted, Jimmy Page. Not a shock to see him at this point. Known to have been a session musician, did stuff like Tom Jones and Donovan Records, and went into the realm of from there going into the Yardbirds. And of course, it's so well known, I don't really need to go into major details of how Led Zeppelin started, and John Paul Jones and him, Robert Plant and John Bonham all seemed to get together, and then they got the name Led Zeppelin because Keith Moon had rumored to have said, "Oh, your band will go down like a Led Zeppelin." Of course, well, I don't have to go into all the stories. We know how big they were and how popular they were over the many years. Of course, for a band that really didn't last more than 12 years, they outsold just about everybody else. And I know he toured with Robert Plant. Interesting enough, I was listening to Robert Plant's solo records in 1968 and 67 and 66. He was doing work on his own that was amazing, amazing songs that never were hits. And he would have probably made it even if Led Zeppelin didn't form. I think Robert Plant would have had an amazing career. It leaves us with 2 more songs on Eddie G's Music World, and why don't we leave them for next week? Why not give you some suspense, like for people listening? Don't look it up on your computer to see what is number 2 and 1. Let it be fun to wait for me to say what they are. I don't even know what they are, but let's face it. If I haven't said the name Jimi Hendrix yet, then that's one. He's got to be up there. And then the other one, I don't remember what I said. Who was the other one that I said? Jimi Hendrix, and well, let it be a surprise. It'll be coming up next week. And then we have another list of top 500 albums. I'm going to take a break on the retrospect for next week in a bit and concentrate on the top 500 albums after I finish up my guitarist list. So this is Eddie G's Music World signing off for another week. I had to wait till Wednesday this week because I had a couple of medical issues to deal with Monday and Tuesday. So thank you, and happily you will be listening and continue listening. And for those that are around, I appreciate it very much. It keeps me going. And I will be back next week. Eddie G's Music World for October 24th, 2018. Signing off for another week. Thank you.